Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking your evening to come learn about entrepreneurship at Kraft Heinz. I'm going to very briefly introduce our phenomenal speaker here. So Hennie Myburgh is on the call. He is the Vice President of R&D for Global Growth and Technology Platforms at Kraft Heinz, which basically means he leads the boat of innovation for this incredible 200 brand company. So I'm excited to hear from him. So I'm actually not even going to go through all of the awesome things that he leads, and I'm just going to totally pass it off to you. So Hennie, here we go.
Thank you, Janelle. That was a very kind introduction. Just confirming, can you guys hear me okay? My computer has been tending to give some feedback. So I'm honored to speak to you today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I've been told I've got 20 minutes, so Janelle, I will ask that you crack the whip if you see I'm falling behind here. This is such a wonderful opportunity because I can speak to people about an area that I have such a lot of passion for. So just a little bit of background from my career. For the most part, I've spent it in big food companies, PepsiCo, Kraft Heinz, Conagra brands locally. But there was a period of 14 months where I just recently spent it in a startup organization as well. So it's provided me with a lot of perspective. So today I'll try and contrast some of that perspective as I call out, how does entrepreneurship, not only in Kraft Heinz, but in industry, and how's industry trying to get to grips with that? So starting out, let's just take a little bit of a future lens and reflect on this. What we as industry need to design today is not necessarily a solution to today's problems. It is solutions for future issues. And this is not an exhaustive list. You can read through it at your own leisure. But companies are actually trying to predict the future. So if you contrast big companies versus startups as an example, where big companies try and apply predictive science versus a startup where the founder's courage of conviction, is clear for everybody to see. This leads to a conundrum. I attended an inspiring talk today by Mark Randolph, who is the founder of Netflix. And a couple of things that he said, I'm going to read this verbatim to you. He said, the easiest way to see what is around a corner is to take 3 steps forward. I tell you, as big companies, we are very uncomfortable doing that. He also said, it's impossible to predict an outcome if it has not been done before. Therefore, learn by doing it. Life, therefore, becomes a series of experiments for the entrepreneur. Versus in big companies, we are actually designing methodologies to avoid making mistakes. But increasingly, companies are evolving, including ourselves, to say, how do you go into an iterative development process with consumers? How do you leverage things like data and analytics, where even in declining segments of industry, you can find some growth pockets and you can focus on that if you know what will bring the magic sauce there. Of all this list here, and as mentioned, not an exhaustive list, bottom right, if I can focus your attention on this, increase funding for food startups. We're seeing the VC world exploding with funding. And Janelle, if you go to the next slide. Because of that, we can also see that with industry, succeeding in innovation is a tough challenge, not just for industry, but even more so for, the startup environment and early stage companies. We are seeing, because of that increased funding, we're seeing a proliferation in startup companies. Hey, Janelle, I think we might have our slides mixed up here. Can you go to just slide 3, the previous one? Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Next one after Gretzky. Thank you. That's the right one. So we see a proliferation in startup companies that brings more competition, more choice, more distinctive attributes, because what these founders and startup organizations do well, courage of conviction and living in the consumer's shoes, they know what these pain points are they need to solve for. And by courage of conviction, they go after that. So because of this proliferation and more competition, we have seen in industry that big launches that we've had in the past, the year one sales of innovation have declined by roughly 50% over the past 5 years. That's a tremendous, decline in sales. It's because of this increased competition and more consumer choice. We have also seen there's a bit of a jargon in industry that says fewer, bigger. That has been the mantra for years. Let's do fewer, bigger things. This approach has not always improved the outcomes. The 4-year survival rate of innovation is roughly 25%, and you dial that forward to 10 years, there's very little actually remaining in the market of these innovations. So, more than 90%, these numbers vary depending on what research you're looking at, but I can tell you more than 90% of innovations fail in the marketplace, as does a startup landscape, so tough environment. The other point I make there, first to scale often beats first to market. And this is the conundrum for the entrepreneur. You start out with one person, yourself, and your courage of conviction and how to grow that. So, examples of categories that actually the leaders who were not the category pioneers, Red Bull, Pamper disposable diapers. Today, they are the category leaders, but they were not necessarily first to market. So there's a theory here that says then how you get to scale and how you partner. I will, come to that later. Large companies obviously have scale advantage. So how can large companies behave like entrepreneurs? So if you go to the next slide. Thank you. Industry is adjusting with different approaches to innovation. One of those approaches is to bring intrapreneurship into a big organization. And that's basically saying, how do we behave like entrepreneurs in a big company, right? How do we encourage that? The second approach is what I listed here on the first bullet, is a collaboration approach. So if a startup organization or entrepreneurs don't have access to that scale, go and find it. I can tell you, and I listed Coca-Cola Co-Lab there, but there's a number of these innovation labs. They set themselves up, they collaborate across the board with startups, they profile startups, they look at, what infrastructure, what benefits, etc., and how they can put their businesses together. So that environment is a ripe environment. So it takes an astute mind to go in there and to identify from both sides, who do you want to play with? It's like courtship, and how to get together and how the sum of all parts is actually better together. Lots of strategic partnerships, consortia, loose federations of collaborations that's out there. I mentioned the VC landscape is exploding. Another point I want to call out here, that if you think to the future, starting out with your idea, there's a difference with companies having legacy assets and, being bound by that. If you have the freedom of not being tethered to a legacy asset and legacy culture and everything else, embracing new approaches like artificial intelligence, digital transformation. This is the one thing I know for a fact will transform our future. And if you incorporate that into your thinking early on and embrace that and make it part of your tool set, that'll be a fantastic gift you can give to yourself. What I mentioned earlier as well, data and analytics have become really important for big organizations. How you start analyzing it differently. Instead of doing confirmatory tests all the time, I'm a food scientist, so we go and do consumer studies and consumer tests, etc., versus a different approach where you take data analytics and say, hey, plant-based, non-dairy, grain-free, vegan, whatever that attribute is, I'm seeing that growing in the market, and I'm just going to go, and this is where the founder's conviction comes in. You live that conviction, you live that product, and you go for it. So that's taking the first step that I mentioned earlier with Mark Randall's example. Increasingly, we are looking to elements like what we call design to value. If you find what that distinctive attribute is, and you identify what the job to be done is and who will you target in the market, the competition's already there. So we refer to things like hiring and firing criteria. Who will you hire? What should your criteria be to be hired? Who will you fire? What is the competition not offering that your product or your offering will have? So something to reflect on. Janelle, if you go to the next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit about stage gate, because this is, if I contrast again big food and the entrepreneurial environment where people start out, early stage companies, etc. The stage gate approach is really just an approach to manage risk. Many people don't like it. Entrepreneurs in particular, balk at this idea. I've been in situations where it's really tough to convince people to bring a little bit of structure to that thinking. Otherwise, life gets a bit crazy around you. This is a risk management tool. The further you progress during the stages of a stage gate, this funnel is there to show that you should, narrow your ideas and start killing them off, and eventually just take, a limited set to market. But the converse is true in terms of cost and resource implications. The further you down the funnel, the bigger the resource implications become. So it's in your best interest to have a process. If I take a quick example of how Kraft Heinz will go about this in a typical project, let's pick a breakthrough innovation. Often, even before this funnel starts, we, and there's some of my team members here, Lexi in particular, that will touch on this later, but we, to the point where we discover stuff like molecules, right? We have such a lot of bright minds and access to that, and I'm very, fortunate to have that. But folks that understand when you bring bacteria and yeast together and you can grow a functional component, something like a natural preservative that can replace, that can clean up your ingredient labels, etc. There's a lot of discovery that needs to happen in technology development, but ultimately, once you have qualified that, then you need to have a very clear strategy, how this will play out. So very early on in a project, have a clear strategy, understand the hiring and firing criteria, the jobs to be done, the distinctive attributes you need to deliver with your product. This process is designed to have checks all throughout. Now, in organizations like ourselves, once there is a development brief or a project brief in place, it basically kickstarts the project. Multidisciplinary teams then will participate. Everybody's got their different role. They bring their functionality to the table. You typically have a project leader, somebody that's great at project management, timeline, keeping the team on task. But also in the spirit of intrapreneurship, it's important that, and I'll talk about our values a little bit later, but that you give teams freedom to express themselves, to own the result, to experiment. So throughout this process, we go from development brief into feasibility, we develop the idea further, and then at some point we commit to develop. These gates, G1 through to G4, these are all decision points in the system that's forcing you to say, hey, are we going to kill this idea? People get emotionally very attached to their ideas. And this is really at the bottom right there where I say head over heart. The conundrum is, if you're a founder and an entrepreneur, you fall in love with the idea. And that is right. That is why big companies, we love engaging with these startup organizations and entrepreneurs. And, we want to fuse those abilities with our own organization. But you need to know when to walk away. Just, be unemotional at that point in time. Truly let the head rule the heart in that sense. And then the other thing to bring into the mix here, set yourself, you set very clear success criteria for yourself. Know that, I don't know, I'm not a gambler, but I have friends that like to go to the casino occasionally, and they've dragged me along once or twice in my life. But I know I'm going to take $20 or $100, and after that, I'm walking away. So I set my success criteria right up front, and I'm walking away, come hell or high water. So make it very clear for yourself at what point, is it not worth going after that. This process is designed to be collaborative. It's designed to provide ownership. But, quite frankly, I think many entrepreneurs are frustrated, as I said initially, with an approach like that. So if you go to the next slide, Lexi, excuse me, Janelle. This is an approach that's increasingly taking hold with big companies. This is an entrepreneurial approach. This is design thinking, but it goes by many names. At the essence of this is an iterative development process where you check in with the consumer the whole time along the way, and you go back the whole time to refine and you optimize. And this is often where I see entrepreneurs succeed, and why, successful entrepreneurships are so appealing to us. You live in the consumer's shoe. You live that product. You have courage of conviction. You refine. You make it better. You ask the whole time, how might we make this better? How might we make this more affordable? How might we make this more sustainable? All those things that the consumer of the future will care for. This is you really understanding the pain points, understanding, what job do I need to do? What pain point do I need to solve? And what will make us ultimately successful? If you go to the last slide here, Janelle, if I reflect on Kraft Heinz as an organization, how we attempt to bring entrepreneurship into our organization, taking the best practices from out there. Candidly, I'll tell you, it is difficult because, we have shareholders and we bring process and governance into place, and many people might feel stifled by that. However, the one thing I've seen, and I've been fortunate in my life to have worked in a couple of places. I'm from South Africa originally, but I worked elsewhere in Europe, in the Middle East, and now in the US. By the way, just became a US citizen, so very happy with that. I've been fortunate to see how that company values transcend geopolitics, transcend issues that you will see in the daily news being really, volatile situations. In Kraft Heinz, we live by our values, and three that I'll call out here specifically why I think this is helping us to act more like entrepreneurs. One is we are consumer obsessed. Those points I made earlier about walking a mile in the consumer's shoes, understanding their pain points, etc. That's a value that not only in a big organization, but as entrepreneurs and innovators that you are and that you will be in your life. If you embrace that, truly immerse yourself in the consumer shoes, it's a fantastic value to live. The other one, we do the right thing. So encouraging entrepreneurship, you need to be able to trust your team members to say, hey, I'm just going to show you where to go. Here's the end point, and I'll see you there. I'll check in occasionally. I'll give you a little call, or I'll check on your journey. But we meet at the summit, and here's how we get there. So, doing the right thing for the consumer, for the environment, for your team members, having each other's backs, that's really important. And the last one, I would say, above everything else, we own it. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to own it, because given that degree of freedom to act on it, you need to own your successes, you need to own your failures, you need to celebrate your failures as well. If you can cultivate an environment where failure is not punished but rewarded, because, this is wisdom in a way. You go through life journey and you made a few mistakes, and shame on you if you didn't learn. So you should actually celebrate failures, early on in your life as well. But ask yourself the tough question: what did I learn? What will I do differently going forward? All of this, contrast that with a founder's mentality. That's what entrepreneurs do. They have this conviction, they have this drive, they have a founder's mentality. As big organizations, we love that. We love to attract talent like that as well. In a perfect world, if you can blend the two environments, that'll be success. So Janelle, I think I've done well in 20 minutes to get through. I'll go on mute here. Happy to answer any questions or participate in the panel discussion later. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hennie. I'm sure everybody would be clapping if it was not virtually through Zoom. But thank you so much. I could learn from you all day. This was really cool to really walk through Kraft Heinz's design thinking with those 4 gates to make sure it's a good head idea and heart idea to continue moving forward with. So everybody else, be very excited, because we have 4 more awesome Kraft Heinz people to learn from. Whoop, if the slide will move, there we go. So these are our 4 panelists. They're cross-functional at Kraft Heinz at varying levels of experience, and they all have incredible stories to share with you today about how they have entrepreneurship playing into their lives. So I'm going to start by asking panelists, can you please introduce yourselves by saying your name, your current role, and your favorite Kraft Heinz product that you've worked on? Nicole, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, my name is Nicole Medway. My current role, I work in new product development on the co-manufacturing procurement team on our cheese categories, snacks, beverages, what else is there? Meal kits, and basically any beverage, snacks, etc. And my favorite products that I've worked on, I did a really cool innovation for Jet Puffed that is not yet in stores, so I can't talk about it. But basically, it combined a lot of different fun chocolates and marshmallows into a really great dessert treat. So that's exciting and soon to be in stores near you.
Awesome. Adam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep, absolutely. Hey, everybody. My name is Adam Hasselquist. I currently run finance for our cheese and dairy platform inside the US, more focused on the commercial side of the business. And my favorite product probably has to be Philadelphia cream cheese, mostly because of all of the different samples we get to do when we're in the office and different cheesecakes that the team brings in.
Oh, yeah, great answer. I look forward to that. Bree, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Bree Kesseler. I lead all licensed merch on our strategic capabilities team in our global growth organization. I work on all of our different brands doing t-shirts, plushies, all the different items that aren't our food products, but share the brand love. So Adam stole, I was going to say Philadelphia cream cheese. I literally just finished a tub this morning, but my next favorite would definitely be Kraft mac and cheese.
Classic. And Lexi?
Hi guys, my name is Lexi Fye. Like Hennie said, I'm part of his organization. I work in R&D on our technical applications team, which in short, basically we take some of the biggest innovations in the food science world and we apply them both to our portfolio as well as some new products that we're working on. So it's a really cool team to be on. I am in product development, so I do everything that has to do with the actual food. And my favorite Kraft Heinz product that I've worked on is also kind of secret because I've been in innovation pretty much the entire time I've worked at Kraft Heinz. But it was a breakfast granola project a long time ago. So that's pretty much all I can say, but it was definitely my favorite product I've ever worked on. I never got sick of doing any taste tests.
Wow, that's incredible. So thank you all for introducing yourselves. I would also ask one last context question for you. Would you mind, we'll go left to right again. Would you mind just saying what function you're working in? So manufacturing, R&D, marketing, finance, and which piece of that funnel of idea generation are you a part of? Are you an early stage versus a later stage of that innovation process?
Yeah, sure. So I am on the operations side of product development. However, I'm involved in the whole process. So the idea is brought to my team pretty early on, and we kind of help determine where it's going to be produced if we know we can't make it internally. And then after that, involved in the scale up and the production, the plant trials, determining which manufacturer we're going to go forward with. And I kind of leave the project after it's been in production for around 3 to 6 months. So really seeing it through until it becomes like a staple in the Kraft Heinz portfolio.
Yeah, and then for me in finance, definitely end to end from start to finish. Ultimately, probably a more straightforward piece of where we play in terms of product development is owning the P&L and the profitability of the product. Not only does it make money on its own, but also are we producing an item now or generating an item that is 50 points lower margin than what we make in the current portfolio. And if you think about, cannibalization and things like that, and taking all those factors in, what is the ultimate value from a P&L or, cash flow perspective is the product going to drive in the future? And because we have that ownership of the P&L and it kind of falls on us to make sure that we're protecting the bottom line, we're also, challenging the assumptions from the marketing teams, from the sales teams and everybody providing that, call it pragmatic view, or the being very much the head versus the heart, I think, of the process probably. So trying not always to be the idea killers in the, kind of process and just P&L side of it, but that's ultimately where we play in that kind of natural, I would say, back and forth between marketing, sales, and finance. It creates, make sure that we create the right products that are going to create value for the company.
So similarly to Adam and Nicole, I would say kind of the whole process. So I'm marketing, but my role within the organization is very unique to Kraft Heinz in that it's licensing. And so licensing is we license out our brands to other product developers or licensees in this case to put our brands on items that we wouldn't produce ourselves. So for example, Kraft Heinz is never going to be a t-shirt company, but we want our brands to exist in the world in new and fun ways. So my role is to lead from contract to ultimately product development, seeing the product in store, whether it's a t-shirt, a plush toy, or like Kraft mac and cheese keychain, kind of part of that whole funnel from start to finish for product development, but definitely unique from Kraft Heinz because not making food products.
So I am in R&D. I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but my R&D role is a little bit different than what someone in the BU or business unit. So people that work on brand maintenance on brands that already exist, similar to teams that I think Nicole works with. So people that are working with the Kraft brand, they would do what we call brand maintenance. So they do everything that has to do with new flavors, new line extensions, maybe something new into the market with that same brand. My team, since we are in innovation and we're working on a bunch of different things at once, and we're not really assigned any type of product, we start pretty early with some ideation from marketing and kind of carry that to get ownership of the entire product. So anything that has to do with creating the product, the formula, the suppliers to get those ingredients for the formula, everything that has to do with the actual food. I kind of am in charge of that up until it actually launches, and then we pass it off to the BUs, whatever makes most sense for that brand. So if we're having a lot of trouble in the plant, we'll stay on it longer just as some support teams, but as soon as possible, pretty much pass it off to the business unit so that we can start working on some new innovations. So that's kind of where product is, but ours is a little bit different than what a typical R&D person does.
Incredible. Thank you all for that context. And I'm actually going to put it in grid mode so we can see everybody at once. Perfect. Okay, so I'm actually going to read off a quote from, I looked up the definition of intrapreneurship, and Investopedia describes it as, quote, a system that allows an employee to act like an entrepreneur within a company or other organization. So again, panelists, can you think of a time you witnessed the entrepreneurial spirit activated at Kraft Heinz, either in your own work or that of another employee?
I think anytime we have projects at Kraft Heinz, there's a lot of entrepreneurship. I kind of take that as ownership. And I think all of us kind of spoke to this at some point during our introduction, but even when you're an employee in the company, as low as you are in the company, you're given something to be in charge of. So like even when I was a trainee, so not even a full-time employee yet, or when I was an intern, I was given a project and it was very open-ended and I could do pretty much whatever I want with it. Obviously, trying to make the product better, but there was no one saying like, oh, this needs to be more salty, add 1% more salt. And I just did the math for them. Like I was the one that was like, oh, this person said in this tasting that it needed more salt. I'm going to do that 1%. So you get a lot of ownership over whatever your projects are. And I think that's something that's very special about Kraft Heinz that even when I was looking at other places, like I never saw that anywhere else. So I think it just happens all the time and it's just part of our culture.
Yeah, I would bounce off that and say that each function throughout the process. So for example, R&D, for example, if you're trying to hit maybe a sodium goal for the product and you know you can't hit it, it's on R&D to call that out. Or for me, it would be on me to call out a financial risk in a manufacturer or a capability that the team wants to be produced that they can't hit. So it's kind of just a lot of ownership there in getting the product produced, but showing that you are taking initiative and being an entrepreneur, I guess. Yeah.
No, I'd add one more example of something specific. So in my business last year, we launched a product and on the first production run, or the first time we manufacture the product, the third party actually created too much product for relative to the demand that we had based on the customers that we had, take the item so far. So we had a bunch of excess inventory and not really anything to do with it. So quickly the marketing team kind of put together an idea and basically took a financial problem and created it into a marketing opportunity, where we did an internal, within our headquarters, we did an internal kind of brand awareness, or like a little event where they passed out, free samples to all the employees. And they even went out onto the street, actually, with folks commuting in and out of the loop to here in downtown Chicago, of handing out free products. So you still had the financial, obviously, implication of it. You couldn't really do anything because you had too much product, but quickly just turned, a couple days later into a marketing event and a brand awareness event. So it was, a quick thing that they turned around, and, didn't have to get a bunch of permission from people. I think everybody's kind of alluded to it, but Kraft kind of allows you to expand your scope and kind of do a little bit outside of what your core job responsibilities would look like.
Awesome. Thank you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, similarly, to jump in, my role when I finished the trainee program and then was put in a role, my group was completely new. Licensing in the organization didn't exist. Kraft Heinz just saw comparable brands or competitive brands even out in the world showing up and delighting consumers in new and exciting ways. So straight, essentially out of undergrad, I was tasked with figuring out what licensing within the organization looked like, creating rituals and routines, and being completely new to the company. It showed that Kraft Heinz put trust in, and also that entrepreneurial spirit in someone young, but also someone new to the organization. It was a testament to their willingness to try new things and explore new rituals and routines that already existed prior.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'll tell you, I've only been at Kraft Heinz for a few months now, and I have heard stories and seen the same thing, and I get to own my project too. So thank you all for sharing those stories. They're all incredible journeys and incredible stories of ownership, because Kraft Heinz definitely preaches and lives out ownership day to day. So my next question is actually, Hennie a little bit alluded to it in his presentation, but what, in your opinion, is the hardest part of product development within the $25 billion company that's Kraft Heinz? Because obviously we're a huge ship to be moving around. So what's hard about being a part of a creative process within Kraft Heinz?
I can jump in first. So when I saw this question, the first thing I said was prioritization, and that's the only thing I typed out and didn't have any notes after it. I would say even distinctly a little bit for Kraft Heinz as a company, that even there's just as big of companies or bigger companies that I guess my perception would be, but probably have a little bit easier time to do prioritization, just because of the categories that we play in. So think of even like a PepsiCo. They have a lot of products, but basically you can summarize them into beverages and snacks, right? There's some things that fall outside of that, but in the US, it's basically beverages or snacks. In the US, for us in Kraft Heinz, we have meats, we have cheese, we have coffee, we have nuts, we have sauces, we have frozen meals, we have all kinds of different stuff. And prioritizing a lot of good ideas in a lot of those places with limited resources, and not even the same purview, and having people kind of experts in all of those places, and just developing what is my strategy, how do I prioritize, and where are my resources going to go, I think is even extra tough at a place like Kraft Heinz.
Yeah, I think along with prioritization, since it's such a large corporation and obviously there are processes put into place to make it stay that way, approvals, that's what I typed out in my notes when I was looking through some questions. That is a big pain point for me in the process, getting accounting, the CFO of the business unit, or depending on the spend, maybe the CFO of the company to approve a contract or a manufacturing site. Lots of approvals needed, which is good, but also can make the process feel longer.
I think the only thing I would add is just Kraft Heinz has such a big reputation. Like whenever I was telling like my family or my friends where I was working, they're like, oh my gosh, like you're going to make mac and cheese and ketchup. But even like Kool-Aid or Cool Whip or pretty much any of our brands, like we just have such a big reputation to hold that I think every single facet of our company has really high standards. And when all those kind of like overlap, it creates a really big hurdle to really overcome. But I think like Hennie kind of talked about, it's kind of our way of like managing our risks and making sure that what we're actually doing and what we get to the end of the finish line, like that's going to be a successful product, and it's going to be a good thing for Kraft Heinz and nothing that can really harm us in the long run.
Hennie, would you like to add? You don't have to, but since you highlighted it a little bit in your presentation.
Sorry, let me just go off mute here. It's really difficult because what I'm hearing from the team here as well, as you grow, and Adam will tell you that financial control and governance and everything else, you need to be really tough. So you build in a lot of processes, etc. And to the entrepreneurial spirit, that might make you feel very restricted and frustrated often. But within that, there are opportunities to express yourselves. We love, actually. I suspect there's a lot of young talent on the phone here, and I dare say I've been around for a little bit. I've been in industry for 27 years or so. We love looking at fresh ways to do things because I have innovation in my blood, and fresh thinking, etc. So bringing in, fusing fresh thinking, new talent, new ways of doing things, and I dare say as well, new technological approaches. I talked earlier about the digital age. I'm just, if I have an issue, I call my son to come and sort me out, and that's just not great. That will transform the way that we operate as companies, how we structure ourselves, and how we empower people. Back to intrapreneurship. So yes, while sometimes it's tough, I can also tell you that from a leadership point of view, our senior leaders, our CEO Miguel Patricio and his staff, they advocate that. I've been fortunate enough to be in a number of meetings with him where he's on record as advocating that. Even Janelle, I think you saw the Mark Randolph conversation this morning. He was mailing me after that to say, take that as a go forward and do, and be entrepreneurial. So yes, it's motivating to be in a company like that.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, everyone not at Kraft Heinz, because it was really a really cool hour-long conversation this morning with the founder of Netflix, who apparently started 6 other companies too. So today's an entrepreneurship day. It's very fun. So I have one more question before I pass it off for some Q&A questions. So audience people, please raise your hand in the Zoom if you have questions. And after this one, I will call on you to come off mute and answer or ask your question. So my last question for the panelists is, what activities or programs did you participate in early on in your career, or maybe even in college, that helped shape your work in entrepreneurship and kind of created your drive for creativity and your passion for doing new things and creating new things and doing things better every day, like Hennie talked about?
Sure, so I'm happy to start. I studied manufacturing and design engineering at Northwestern, which is basically a degree in mechanical engineering focused on product development. So early on, when I entered college, I knew I was interested in design and product development. So kind of just an itch from high school and an entrepreneurship class I took then. But I was also a part of a club called Design for America, where I got to do really cool projects with local Evanston community, kind of making a real difference, which is really awesome when you're 18 to 22. And then at Kraft Heinz, I was also a corporate management trainee. So my first rotation was in R&D. So I got to see the product side of things. And my second rotation was in strategy on the e-commerce team. So I got to see more of the business decision side. And I kind of wanted to be closer to the product development, which is how I ended up working in the operations, new product development space. So yeah, a lot of things throughout college and in Kraft Heinz, just trying out different roles, all closely tied to product development.
I can go next. Similar to Nicole, I majored in chemical engineering, and I think just having an engineering degree, like you're just trained to be creative and find solutions and think differently. So I think that was always something I was interested in when I was applying to colleges, like even way back in high school. But even when I was in college, I was actually a cheerleader for Ohio State, and part of our community service was going and talking to donors, doing some community events. Pretty much I just got to talk to a lot of people and kind of got them excited about Ohio State, but I always got to ask them, like, what do they do? Like, why are you Ohio State fans? And a lot of them, like just hearing what their careers are, or just like their backgrounds and everything like that. I think that was always really exciting. And a lot of people just I mean, even in this world, like starting your own company is pretty common. So I feel like hearing a lot of those stories always made me excited to be somewhere that would like allow me to do that, even if it's in a big company. Like I'm able to own my own projects and be a part of kind of the bigger picture, but getting to actually make a difference and make some decisions that impact the larger picture.
And I would say probably one more thing is anything broadly that requires problem solving or critical thinking, whether it's case study competition or running a student org. And I'd say specifically that requires you to wear multiple hats. And what I mean by that is you can go through your career and kind of get stuck in different silos of your jobs that, I'm the base marketing person that runs forecasting for this brand, or I'm the finance manager on this category and I do, innovation or whatever it is. And I think those more and more opportunities that you can put on multiple hats where you have to think not just like the finance person, but like the marketer and the salesperson, and just broadly think about problem solving, gives you more experience in that space. And you're going to be able to, do better in those situations than you would have if you're just kind of sticking to your specific role. So kind of get into your role or whatever you're doing, master that specific core responsibility, and then see where you can spread out more broadly and kind of expand the scope.
If I may add, Janelle, quickly to what Adam said, what I found really helped shape my innovative mindset is what I'll call critical experiences. Be deliberate in your choice of experience. I've heard just a few of our speakers here mentioning the various assignments. So if you are in a position where you can choose, different assignments, do that. Don't get into a comfort zone and, grow there. Some people, and in the science world, often people are sometimes really happy to just be very deep and an expert in something, and that's not wrong. That's perfectly fine. But if you can force yourself to think broadly, seek critical experiences, it depends on your personal situation. In a large organization like ourselves, there's the opportunity to move around. I've heard here, I think, Nicole, you mentioned that you moved across different departments. That's wonderful if you ever can have that opportunity. Now, in a startup environment, it really does teach you a different way how to just survive on your own, get the job done by yourself. That is why big companies like ourselves love, entrepreneurial people, and specifically from the startup world. But you don't have that structure and the best practices, etc. It's a blend. It depends on your personality in the end as well. But in my case, seeking out critical assignments and different experiences help to broaden my mind.
Bree, did you want to share? I saw you went off mute.
Yeah, that's okay. I was going to say I completely what Hennie said, and also what Adam, I really like the problem solving opportunities and things like that. Like in college, I majored in learning and organizational change, and essentially throughout that whole program, it was case studies and critical thinking, and it was constantly testing that entrepreneurial spirit. So completely just piggybacking off what everyone else said, completely agree with what they mentioned.
Yeah. Incredible. Thank you guys for sharing those stories. And I would agree too. Again, I've heard a ton of stories from people jumping cross-functionally at Kraft Heinz, which I did not know was a thing at any company, that you could go from finance to marketing to sales to R&D. So that's very unique to Kraft Heinz. And I think that builds part of our entrepreneurship spirit and that drive for ownership. So Max Reinstein, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Hi. So I just want to ask, what is one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur like myself who's starting their journey as an entrepreneur? Like if you could go back and tell yourself when you're young, about my age, entering college, like what was one piece of advice you would give to them? And this is directed to any of the panelists who would like to answer.
I'll start out and get the ball rolling. Passion is a wonderful thing. What I've often seen with young entrepreneurs, that passion, that burning flame that you have, keep it. Also, life is a series of experiences. It's not always going to work first time out. Remember what I said with the stage gate approach, head over heart sometimes. Fail fast, fail early. but learn from it and move on. But passion, Max, in my case, I have great respect for that.
My advice would be to not necessarily focus on like the picture that you think you want, and to be flexible with what comes up. So I never thought I would be exactly where I am, and it's all based on experiences that I've had. So just be open and flexible, and if something seems interesting, don't be afraid because it's not exactly what you thought you wanted to do.
Completely agree with Nicole. I think like the willingness to learn and flexibility is something that anyone in this kind of industry has to be open to, especially in college, and also past that. You have so many, networking opportunities, learning opportunities. Take those by storm and really learn and grow from them, and also keep those experiences close, because you never know when maybe something you learned back in college or someone you worked with said to you will come back and spark an idea or an initiative for you.
The last thing I would say is I think it's very natural coming out of college to think really hard and focus very specifically on the one specific role you're getting right out of college, right, in your first job. And not that it's unimportant, that first role, but it's much less important than you think it is. And you'll realize that later on, in that it's more about, is this a company I want to work for? Is this a place where I can see growing my career? Do these products interest me? The first job is going to come and go very, very quickly. So I would focus on that less, focus more on the people, the culture, the products. Does that interest you? Do you think it looks like a place that you could see yourself longer term? And just focus less on the specific job that you're walking into.
The only thing I would add to that is that feedback is like gold, honestly. Like if you're trying to sell anything to anybody, like ask your friends, ask your family, ask them anything about whatever you're working on. Even if it's hard to take feedback sometimes, like getting that feedback is always useful, and you can always better your product based off of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely learning to take feedback as often and frequently and as from diverse voices as much as possible. So I agree with that. And thank you all for sharing that advice. I ditto everything. I don't see any other questions, but again, Q&A people, if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. I'll see it. For now though, I'm curious internally, do you guys see any trends happening in corporate entrepreneurship? So COVID related or not, obviously we had to shift how innovation gets done with everything going virtual, at least at first. So can you talk a little bit about what's changing, what's shifting, and what you think will actually stick long term that we've learned from this COVID experience?
I think travel is way less important than people thought. Not necessarily just in the food industry, but with like pretty much all industries like consulting, etc. Obviously important for quality reasons to like go and travel and see a plant, but I feel like we've gotten to know that you're able to give the same presentation to a large group of people, and you don't need to travel to a city within the US to give it to someone. So I think that that's something kind of unrelated, just in general, that in the business sense will probably stick around.
Similarly, I would say less specific to just Kraft Heinz or the food industry, but I think COVID and everything this year has created a need for more flexibility in companies in terms of how we run things, scenario planning, things like that. So we talked about Kraft Heinz, and all big companies have a lot of processes that they do, right? And that processes are great and they're there for a reason, but there's going to be things that pop up that are going to make you have to cut your process time, by 80%, right, to make sure to get things done. Which we saw a lot, especially on the manufacturing side, as we saw demand increase and consumption of our products when people can't go out to eat and they're going to grocery stores more. So having that flexibility and then tying that back to kind of what I was talking about earlier on the problem solving side, you're going to have to require employees to kind of take on larger scopes, think outside the box a little bit more, and be a little bit, called scrappier in their roles, and just be prepared for some of these things and have the more flexibility rather than the rigidity that I would say some of the companies that have today.
I think another thing that is also kind of more general and not just at Kraft Heinz is that just like the world has a bigger focus almost on mental health and self-care. That's something that I think I even noticed just from the amount of meetings and emails that we get from our Live Well team at Kraft Heinz is like, oh, we're going to do yoga. Like we're going to offer this workout. We're going to offer this speaker to come in and talk about mental health, or talk about, I think we had the Calm app recently. So I think having that bigger focus on that makes your employees feel more cared about, and especially the big focus on to make sure you're working from home instead of living at work. I think that's a big one, especially because we've been working from home for so long. I think self-care, I think, is a big one that has popped up recently.
I will add globalization. I think what COVID showed us is that you could really work for anybody from any place, anywhere. It just opens up that world. We're working with universities right now in Eastern Europe and elsewhere that in the past, I would have thought that you have to be face-to-face. That's not the case anymore. In some cases, there's just jobs where you have to be, there in person. But I think technology, number one, the scale we are just having, just look at the stock prices that has, grown exponentially, Zoom being one of those. But globalization definitely, and it will be a remaining factor. It's not going to go away after COVID. It'll be a new reality.
I agree. Thank you all for sharing that. David Moon, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, good evening, by the way, and thank you so much for joining us on this evening for a panelist discussion. So I have been following a bit in regarding to like the investing trends within the agri-food industry within the past summer, especially as COVID has been happening. And my questions were a bit directed toward the protein meat packaging side. I didn't want to get too technical, so a little bit like very high level question that I wanted to ask was, so deboned meat production has been falling because it's more difficult to process the deboning process within like meat packing facilities, right? And a lot of your portfolio products, within Oscar Mayer, for example, are deboned meat. So have there been some like interesting trends or some of the innovations that you guys have been approaching from like a downstream perspective on handling these new type of meat packaging processes? I don't think it's like a question that I really get to ask people unless they're literally within the industry, within these product management. So that'd be kind of interesting to hear from you guys.
You did your homework. Did any of you panelists work with meat?
So I run our cheese business, so I don't work with meat, but I get to listen to some of the issues that they've had that you alluded to this year in terms of production. I'm not an R&D nor in the meat business, but what I would say is given the issues that industry has had and the complexity of a supply chain like a meats, I would say that's probably one of the categories or kind of big platforms within our company that is going to change. That could change pretty dramatically longer term. It's one that's been disrupted multiple times, whether it's for health issues or perceived health benefits or issues. And I think, it's probably a question for someone more technical to answer, but more broadly, I think it's a space that, it really is important for someone like a brand build or kind of the idea phase of the marketing for innovation, connecting with our manufacturing teams, to understand the nuances of some of that, some of the production issues and supply chain issues that they have, and making sure that products not only meet consumer needs, but also from a functional standpoint of being able to create the products longer term. We have the right assets and manufacturing capabilities to do so.
Sure, and I kind of had a follow-up question regarding that since you do deal with dairy products, if you don't mind. So normally the culling season for dairy cows are towards the latter half of the year. And this year, because of COVID, there's a huge backlog of regular, just beef in general. So my assumptions were, if that's the case, then, dairy cows are producing a little bit more milk than usual, which may, I thought, lead to, they either have to dump that or sell that for a cheaper price to have those procured and manufactured into secondary dairy products. My guess would be the latter because the procurement cost for dairy would be a little bit lower, increasing margin for end user products for distribution in terms of you guys. So to kind of summarize that, have you guys been seeing kind of a ramp up in terms of production for cheese and other secondary dairy products?
I would say a little bit yes and no. No, in the sense that the food service industry is obviously taking a huge hit, right? Restaurants and everything with shutdowns. So if you think about when you eat a normal meal at home versus eating a meal at a restaurant, you're generally eating more cheese at a restaurant, right? You're ordering appetizers, things are just more indulgent when you order out. So because of that, I would say cheese, overall consumption has been hurt by that. But We have a nuance with cheese. If you think about market prices, actually right now is that market prices are kind of skyrocketed, our commodity prices. And that's because the government has gone in and some of these food box programs and some of the stimulus that they've gone back in, that they're kind of artificially dumping money into the market versus just pure supply and demand. So to your point, like cow culling is way down because cheese prices are high. People are pumping out as much milk as possible. That should be because demand is down because of food service and your supply is up. That should be creating low prices. It's actually doing the opposite because the government is putting billions of dollars back in through these food box programs. So all the farmers and everyone are trying to take advantage of that. So I would say the market right now is not working as it should based on normal economics because of government intervention. But it's, again, overall, to your point, very interesting topic this year and something that we've been continuing to monitor because it's a very different dynamics going on than what we would typically see.
I do want to just jump in and add one thing. So in general, when in the procurement space, we sign contracts with specific pricing commitments. So while we are seeing these price increases, a lot of the times they don't necessarily hurt you until the following year because you have a price commitment and a contracted volume that you're going to buy from these dairy industry places.
Sure, thank you very much. And I'm guessing that the future price for this year were a bit interesting just due to that government regulation coming in. But thank you, very insightful. Thank you very much.
Definitely, David. And I'll just add to your point around supply chain impact. We've seen a lot of milk having to be dumped. I mean, if you read the news reports, in Wisconsin, et cetera, hundreds of thousands of gallons being dumped. It's just, to Adam's point, the food service industry has suffered a tremendous setback, and that outlet being not available anymore resulted in a lot of product loss. Sad, but that's reality right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. And thank you, David, for the very technical question that I barely understood, but that's okay. I'll share a quick thank you slide real quick. But thank you all for participating today. Thank you, panelists and Hennie, for sharing such awesome insights about Kraft Heinz innovation process and how cross-functionally we are all creative and we're all working on ownership and living out creative values in everything we do. So thank you all again. If you have any questions, email me. I'm happy to potentially find you somebody that can answer your question if I cannot. But I think Sydney wanted to wrap up real quick, so I'll pass it off to Sydney.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to the team at Kraft Heinz. This is a great event. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you all sharing your perspectives and your approach and opportunities. I just wanted to take a quick moment to share some of the things that we have going on at the Scandalaria Center. We have some exciting programs and competitions open. We are currently recruiting for the St. Louis Entrepreneurial Fellowship. This is an opportunity for students to explore innovation and entrepreneurship at WashU and in St. Louis, and includes an excellent seminar exploring entrepreneurship, as well as a guaranteed paid summer internship at a local startup. So if you're interested in that, please apply by November 9th. All the information can be found at sc.wustel.edu. And then we also are currently accepting applications for the Global Impact Awards. This is an opportunity for any current WashU student, any alumni from within the last 10 years, and any postdoctoral researcher at WashU with a venture that is scalable, sustainable, quick to market, and has a positive impact on society, to get 6 months of expert mentorship, as well as an opportunity to win $50,000, up to $50,000. So the current cycle for that is open. So we encourage you all to apply by November 30th. And then lastly, if you have a creative bug or just want to, take a break from studying or applying for internships or working, we have a greeting card design contest that's open. We invite students to submit their designs for our Thanksgiving card, as well as our Scandalaria Center thank you card. We are accepting those submissions through next Monday. So check those out. And then we also have a bunch of very cool events coming up in celebration of St. Louis Entrepreneurship Week. We have a panel on November 11th, and Global Entrepreneurship Week. We have a panel the following Wednesday for that. So visit scandalaris.wustel.edu to find out about all the opportunities we have coming up. Thank you, Kraft Heinz, for joining us today and putting together this event. And thank you to all of the attendees who joined us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a great evening.